working with symbols and making our Flash projects a little more interactive. Let's face it, that's the whole point of Flash. The first thing we need to do is go to Moodle and we do. We need to grab some stuff.
Are we recording?
Yes.
Are we live in this box?
No, I'm just recording.
Are we live?
Because I know, like, all the good students who are absent today are going to go back and watch the demo.
Colin is?
Ha ha.
Can Colin get on there? Colin, if you're listening to this.
It's not streaming live.
Help! Hey, if he listens to it, like, later, Colin, if you're listening to this, you probably can't go to GPA. Sorry, buddy. That's what I gotta say to that.
Nobody wants those germs.
I think he received my message.
If Colin's watching this, I'm gonna give him a little bit of nostalgia. Hey, Colin, do you remember that time we went and saw Batman vs Superman together?
Oh my gosh.
Colin, remember that time?
Okay, all right. All right, the first one that we're going to be working with is FL3_1. We will also be working on 2. So if you want to download them both right now, you can. It's totally fine. I think for the most part, those are the ones that we're going to be working with. A biscuit, huh? All right, so after you download those, we want to open up the 3_1. Should have a red car on it. And once we open it, let's go ahead and save it. Give it another file name. Looks like in step number 1 on page 3-6. That's where we're going to pick up today. We're going to name it Cool Car. Real creative in their naming. Yeah. I don't think you'll think it's a cool car, but that's okay.
What is it, like a Honda Civic? No, it's not a Honda Civic.
That's a converter. We're gonna turn it purple?
Okay, so up to this point, our Flash document only has one object in it, okay, which is obviously this car. And it was created using drawing tools, so it wasn't a graphic that was imported in, okay? This was actually a drawn car with the tools. Duffy, get with us, okay? I'm not going to have too much patience about this today. So it was a drawn car, okay, with all the tools that you have on your toolbar. It was not a graphic, okay? I want you to know that because some things that we're going to start doing here kind of make sense when you think about you actually drawing things on the stage as well, okay? And this not being a graphic yet. Because one of the things that we definitely want to do whenever we do create different objects using like the drawing tools that we have available to us, most typically you'll want to convert it into a symbol. And you've got 3 options when you convert things to a symbol. It can be a movie clip, it can be a button, or it can be a graphic. And it just depends on how you want it to act, on whether you tell it to be a movie clip, a button, or a graphic. Now, obviously, in what we're going to be doing with this, we're going to want the car to be a graphic. So we want it to be an entire graphic that acts like a graphic, okay, so that we can change colors, we can move it around. Hello? Hello? Uh-huh. No, but I have like the empty rolls. If somebody says, okay, sorry. All right, bye. Question. So the first thing that we need to do here is actually convert this into a graphic. So we're going to use our selection arrow tool. We're going to drag a rectangle around the car itself. That way, I'm going to make mine a little larger so you guys can see it a little easier. So that it selects all of the components of the car. Now, at this point, okay, it's just drawing objects. That's why we want to make sure that everything gets selected. And then if we go up to modify and then convert to symbol, we're going to name it G-Car. And then notice you have a little pull down list. This is what I was talking about earlier. You have 3 options. Do you want it to behave like a movie clip, a button, or graphic? Well, in this instance, we want it to be a graphic. And then we can tell it OK. Now, over in our property panel, if we go to the library tab, now we have our graphic called G-Car. Okay, I guess I should have shown you first that before we did that in the library there wasn't anything there. Okay, so now, for example, if we wanted to have another car on the stage, okay, I can, in the library, click on the G-Car down here, the name, G-Car in the library, and I can drag and drop another car onto the stage. Okay, and now when I move it around and do things to it, it doesn't behave so that it's, you know, all these tiny little parts that make a car. It's one complete graphic. Let's go ahead, picking up on the next page, they want us to flip it horizontal. So let's go to Modify on the menu bar, Transform. Notice all of your options that you have under Transform, where you can do free transform, which means you control it. You've got scale, rotate, and skew. You can rotate it 90 degrees clockwise or 90 degrees counterclockwise. You can flip it vertical or flip it horizontal. In this instance, we're going to flip horizontal. So it's going to flip the car around for us. And then we're going to go to the Property tab. And under Color Effect, right now the style is set to none, the little pull down list there. We're going to change that to alpha. And we're going to bring this down to 50%. So it's going to be a little bit more faded out, okay, than the original. All right, so this is what we should have so far. Any problems or questions up to that point? All right, let's pick up on page 3-8. Let's go back to the library panel. And let's double click our G-Car symbol here. Okay, let's double click that, because what happens when we double click it, okay, the actual name of it over here with the little funky symbol beside of it, notice it opens this up in a completely different like workspace area. And your car should also be, let me zoom this in because you might be able to see it a little better, but it's got like all the little dots in it. Okay, because once we get here, this is where we can edit our graphic. Okay, so within the library panel, we have our graphic. We can move, place as many copies as we want onto the stage. If we want to edit our graphics so that it's a permanent edit, And it's not something that we just want to do to one car on our stage. We want to do it to the graphic itself. This is the mode that you have to be in. You have to double click it, open it up in edit mode so that you can actually change things around. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to work on are the hubcaps. So first of all, with my selection tool, I'm just going to click in the white area so it deselects the entire car. Because instead, I want to select just the light gray part of the front hubcap. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, and I'm going to click on just the gray hubcap of the back wheel. I want to change the fill color, okay, for this. So if I come over to my toolbar, to my fill color, down at the bottom where you have all of the gradients, you have a blue gradient. If you want to pick something else, you can pick another color. I'm just going with the book here. Notice that because I had them both selected and I made that change, then of course it made that change to both of the hubcaps. All right, when I'm done with that, up here where the tab says coolcar.fla, I've got a link that says Scene 1. So if I click back on Scene 1, it's going to take me back to where I have my two instances of my two cars. Notice that since I made that change to the graphic itself, it made the change to both of those. Okay, so anytime, here's what always kills me is that I'll sit there and watch you guys work on some of this stuff, and people will go in and try to make individual edits to the same graphic. Like if they have 5 instances of the graphic on their stage, they'll spend all of this time meticulously editing each of those, when all you have to do is go to the library panel, double click to open up your graphic in edit mode, make whatever changes you want to make, and then it reflects on how many ever instances you have of your graphic on your stage. So does that make sense? Trying to kind of hit that a little heavier than I usually do, just because it seems like I watch too many students spend too much time trying to make those edits. All right, so let's go ahead and use our selection tool to select the bottom car. Now, let's say for just this car, okay, I want to do something different. Okay, so I'm going to edit it here in Scene 1 mode. I'm not going to go to edit mode because I don't want to edit the original graphic. I'm just editing this one car. So I'm going to go up to Modify and Break Apart. So now that I broke this apart, it's no longer linked to the original graphic. Okay, so if I make changes to that original graphic again, it's not going to make those changes to this particular car. All right, I'm going to click somewhere on the stage just so it deselects all those parts of the car. And I'm going to click on the front hubcap of just this bottom car. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the back one as well. And I'm going to change the fill color to a light gray. You can just pick it, or the hexadecimal is 6 9s. say, so it turns back to like the light gray. Okay. So now do you understand kind of how that works with the graphics? So if you want it to affect every copy of the graphic that you have, you go into edit mode. If you want to just do something to one of them, you select it, break it apart, make the changes that you want. Okay, let's go back to the library panel and let's double click the GCar symbol icon to go ahead and go back and edit the original. I'm going to click on kind of the maroon color of the front part of the car. I'm going to hold down the shift key and then I'm going to click on the back part of the maroon body part of the car. All right. And in the book it tells us to make it red gradient. You guys can make it whatever color you want. Once you get it changed to whatever color that you want, you can go back to scene 1 and it's made that change. And then we're going to go ahead and save what we've done up to that point. Okay, so that's the biggie. The whole point of that section is for you to understand how to edit graphics. Okay, double click it in the library panel if you want to make changes to the graphic that affects every instance of the graphic. If there's one instance of the graphic that you want to format differently, you need to break it apart and then so that's no longer attached to the original graphic, and then make whatever changes that you need to make. Any questions or comments about how to do that? All right, then let's go ahead and open up the 3_2 file that we downloaded. And then we're going to pick up on page 3-12. All right, so here's a good example of how they planned out different layers and they named the layers. Okay, because we've got a lot going on here. We've got the title, the car race. We've got 2 different cars. We have a start line, we have a finish line, and then we have text that says finish line. So if you take a look at the timeline itself and look at your layers, you can see, okay, how those have been broken apart, okay, and labeled appropriately. So it's really easy to go and find what it is that you want to edit. Okay, right now if we press play, okay, this animation occurs, okay, from frames 1 to frame 65. What you should notice is that on frame 65, a little reset button pops up, because what should happen is once the race finishes, okay, the user should be able to hit the reset button and the cars start over again. Okay, now we're going to get to the point where we're going to create buttons and make them work. One of them being the reset button. We are also in this chapter going to kind of start a button that starts the race instead of the race starting automatically. Because if I go up here to control and test movie, so see how it would behave as an actual movie file. It looks kind of good at first, but it starts automatically. I want the user to be able to control when it starts, so I want a button that the user can click on. The car race starts. And then I want this reset button to be available because right now it's going too fast. You couldn't even hit reset and get it to work unless you're like really fast on the draw there. Okay, so now we're going to get into buttons and how buttons work and function in a very simple format. Okay, so we're going to pick up on page 312. I'm going to go ahead and save this because chances that we're going to get through all of this today are pretty slim. Let's just go ahead and name it Car Race and save it so that we can come back to it tomorrow. All right, so let's tackle kind of one thing at a time here. Okay, we don't need to do any of that. If you guys take a look at the library panel right now, you should see all of the elements that make up our Flash animation up to this point. What you will start noticing when we work with this more and more, the graphics have that particular symbol. The buttons, which is the first one, the B reset, the button symbol is different from the graphic symbol. So this is how you visually tell the difference between what's a graphic and what is a button in Flash. Okay, if you go to the library panel. Okay, so we've got the reset button. We've got a border, we've got car 1, car 2, we have the finish line, and we have the title. Okay, all of those have been converted into actual graphics. Now, some people like to organize, especially when the Flash projects get really large. Some people like to create folders and put all of their buttons in a button folder, all their movie clips in a movie clip folder, and all of their graphics in a graphics folder. I'm going to leave that up to you. Okay, that's a personal preference. If you want to create folders, if you go down to the bottom of the library panel, the second button or the second icon is a new folder button. So you could click that and you could create your 3 folders, and you could throw your buttons in the button folder, your movie clips in the movie clip folder, and your graphics in the other. Okay, that becomes a little more necessary and useful when you have a really long list of items in the library. Probably not necessarily a must-have for this particular project. Okay, but I just want you to know that that is available to you. Okay, you can also rename any of your library items as far as graphics, buttons, or movie clips by right mouse clicking on them. You can make a duplicate of it. You can also delete. Okay, those are probably the 3 most common that people use is rename, delete, or duplicate. So you have that option as well. All right, so let's say that I want to also throw in the mix maybe a third car, so that car that we created in the Cool Car Flash. What you guys should notice is in the library panel at the very top, you have a pull-down list. So whatever files you have open, it shows those files. So if I went to Cool Car and I told it to copy that, and then I went back to the Car Race library, I could paste that graphic in there. So this is how you can use graphics, buttons, movie clips from other Flash animations that you've created and put them in a new one as well. okay? You just have to make sure that it's an open file, because the library panel only gives you options in the pull-down list of things that are currently open. Okay, so that's how you can kind of keep using the same types of graphics, or if there's a graphic from one animation that you created that you want to use on a new one, makes it fairly simple for you to do. So any questions about any of that? All right, let's get into creating the actual buttons, because that's kind of where the fun begins. All right, so right now our top layer is our reset layer. So I'm going to select that because above that I want to insert in a new layer. I'm picking up on page 3-18 if you're following along in the book. So I've created a new layer. I'm going to rename that so that it says signal, because this is going to be my layer where I set up my button to kind of be the signal for the race to begin. Okay, since I want this to be a button, whenever I go to my shape tool, up to this point we've been using like the rectangle and the oval tool. Some of you might have played around with the Polystar as well, but there is a rectangle primitive tool and an oval primitive tool. When we're working with buttons, it's better to use the primitive tools than to use just the regular rectangle or regular oval. Now, can you still create buttons using the other ones? Yes, you can. But there's a couple things, and we'll get to that here in a few minutes, on what you can do with these primitive tools. So I'm going to choose the rectangle primitive tool. We're going to use the red gradient kind of for the beginning look of our button, because that's going to indicate stop. We're going to go through various variations here so that we basically have a red, which means stop, a green, which is go, so that the race can begin, and then we're going to go into a button that means the race is over. It's going to be like a gray scale. All right, so I want to draw this in. So I've got my fill color set to the red gradient. I don't want a stroke color, so for the stroke I'm just going to select the little white box with the red line through it. That means no. So I don't want a stroke color around this. Okay, so I've set it for no stroke and the red gradient. All right, the other thing I'm going to change here is under rectangle options. I'm going to make this more of a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to set it to 5.0, and once I type in that in the first box and click out of it, all of the other three remaining boxes should update to 5.00. So I'm going to give it kind of a rounded rectangle look. So it's going to have rounded corners instead of sharp edge corners. All right, and then let's go ahead and draw this rectangle above the finish line. And once we get that drawn in, let's go to the third button down on our toolbar, which is automatically set for the free transform tool. But if we click the little arrow in the corner, we can change it to our gradient transform tool. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we're going to click on the rectangle that we just put in here. Now, we did this in chapter 2, okay, where we could play around with the way the gradient looked, okay, by moving around the different aspects, whether it was the square, okay, that kind of brings in the gradient. If we want to kind of lighten it up a little bit, I mean, it is supposed to kind of act like a light, so we definitely want the red, okay, to show for stop. And then once I get the gradient set where I want it to be, let's go back to our selection tool. Let's select our rectangle. And we're ready for this to be converted to a symbol so we can tell it to act like a button. So we're going to go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. I'm going to name it B Signal. And the type is going to be a button this time. Okay, make sure you tell it that you want it to be a button. And then click OK.
What did you do?
B Signal. Okay, so we have our basic button. Let's go to our library so we can see that, because now we should have two buttons. We have the reset button and the B Signal button. Let's double click on the B Signal button so it opens up in its edit mode. Now this edit mode looks a little different because what I want you guys to kind of pay attention to here is on the timeline, you have an up, an over, a down, and a hit. Okay, this is only available whenever your symbol is a button. Because let's face it, when we deal with buttons, okay, usually buttons go through different looks according to what the user is doing, right? The button could change colors once you hover over it. The button could change colors once you click on it. And then the button could change colors once it's already been used. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, the up, or the first instance of what the button's going to look like, is already set. Now we're going to tell it what color we want it to be when the user hovers over the button, when they click down on it, and then when they release it once it's already been hit. So that's why it's named up, over, down, and hit. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's click on the over frame down in the timeline, and we want to go ahead and insert in a keyframe there. So to insert in a keyframe, if I right mouse click, I get a little menu that pops up and I can tell it insert keyframe. What a keyframe does in Flash means, oh, something's going to happen, something's changing, and that's what's happening here. Oh, when the user hovers over this button, something's going to happen, something's going to change from the original state. And what's going to change is on the over, we want it to be the gray gradient. So when they hover over it, it's the gray gradient. And then we move on to the down state. So we click on the frame for down in the timeline. We right mouse click. We insert a keyframe because, oh, something else is going to happen whenever the user presses down on it. And we want it to change to the green gradient. And last but not least is hit. We have to select hit. We need to right mouse click, insert in a keyframe, and the final look of the button is going to be the blue gradient. Any problems on getting those keyframes in and those colors set? All right, then you can go ahead and click back on scene 1. All right, let's test how the button behaves, okay? So to do that, like right now when we hover over to try to click it, nothing is actually happening because we have to enable it to allow us to do simple button actions. So if we go up to Control on the menu bar and we select Enable Simple Buttons, now when I hover over the button, okay, it should turn a gray gradient. When I click on it, okay, it should turn green. Okay. We can't play the whole animation through right now to see, okay, what happens once it gets to the end. Okay, but we're banking on the fact that we have all the rest of these working correctly, that the blue is going to work for us as well. Okay, so after I test that, I'm going to take off the Enable Simple Buttons under the Control menu. Did anyone's not work when you enabled Simple Buttons? We're all good? All right. All right, let's get into assigning actions because we've got the basis of all of this, but now we need to assign actions to tell it what to actually do. Okay, we have a button, we have the button stages set up, but there's no action assigned to these buttons yet. Okay, because when we go up here and we test our movie, you know, the race is still starting without me doing anything to the buttons. I mean, yeah, I can click on this, it acts like a button, but there's no action assigned to it. So you kind of have to break this down into 2 parts when you're creating buttons. Get your buttons to behave the way you want them to first, and then go in and assign the actions to them. All right, so the first problem I have is that this is going in a continuous loop, right? It never stops. Okay, we need the race to stop once it's crossed the finish line. So let's take care of that action first. Okay, and I'm going to pick up on page 3-26 for this. All right, so I need to add a new layer on top of, because actions work the same way as all of your other objects, where I'm going to constantly be telling you for all the different actions that you want, okay, like a stop movie action, you're going to want to put it on its own layer. So let's insert in a new layer. And I'm going to name it Stop Movie because I need this thing to stop and quit looping. All right, on frame number 1 of my Stop Movie layer, that needs to be selected. Okay, if it's not, this isn't going to work, and then you're going to get frustrated, tell me that you did it right and it's not working, and then I'm going to be like, no, you didn't. So make sure frame number 1 is selected of the Stop Movie layer. All right, then I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to come down and select Actions so that I can get my menu of different actions that I can assign. Okay, so a little panel should open up. Okay, that breaks down the different types of actions that there are into folders. The stop action is in the Global Functions folder. So we're going to go to Global Functions. We're going to go to Timeline Control. And we're going to then, of course, choose Stop. So double click Stop. Once you do, it kind of looks like TextPad a little bit, okay, with your action code in there. okay, which is a little more JavaScript than HTML. Okay, so it's assigned the stop function. Now, something that I want you to pay attention to, because a lot of times, especially when you guys are new at this stuff, you assign the stop action to the wrong thing, or you assign the wrong action to a button. What you have to be careful of is when you open this panel, do you guys see down here this tab that says Stop Movie 1? That I'm circling. It's telling you that yes, you are on the stop movie layer and you are on frame number 1. If that says something else, okay, then you're not in the right place and you won't get your stop movie layer to work. Okay, same thing with buttons. You always have to make sure that whatever button you're assigning an action to, that's the button that it shows down here at the bottom. All right, so I've told it that I want it to stop. So then I can close out of my action. And then I need to come all the way out to frame number 65 on my stop movie layer. And I need to right mouse click and insert a keyframe. When I do that, and you go back and you play, now it should stop and it shouldn't loop anymore. Is anyone still looping? So we're all good? Everyone stopped? All right, that's probably a good place to end for today. Make sure that you save Car Race because we're going to open this back up and finish it tomorrow. Don't forget that tomorrow is the end of the 9 weeks, so anything that you need me to grade to improve your 9-week grade, you need to get that to me by the end of the day tomorrow.
You ate soggy food for breakfast. Soggy what?
Did you say meat for breakfast?
Yeah, that's what I said.
You're an outfit today, boy.
Isn't it